awoke once again in Cochabamba before setting off for our daily ritual of musical gas stations.
Trying to get gas, that's all.
Encountering a wide array of stations, either out of gas, refusing to sell us fuel, or those that would, on the condition that we purchased it in a container, such as a plastic bag.
Oh, no way.
Hmm.
Put it in a damn bag.
That's the first time I've ever seen that.
And via a third party. And this gentleman was more than willing to lend a hand for a small donation. And speaking of small, Chad struggled a bit hitting the mark on this itty-bitty makeshift funnel.
I think I spilt more than I got in the tank. All right.
But with most of our hard-won gas actually in the tank, we set off to reascend Bolivia's notorious Highway 4. From there, we would lay tread north on National Highway 1, foregoing the much spicier Highway 25 through the mountains, which we'll get back to later, into Nuestra Señora de la Paz, Bolivia's administrative capital city. For those of you following along, you may recall that we had already ridden Highway 4 out of Sucre a week or so prior. And breaking with Chad's hard and fast rule to never ride the same road twice, here we were again. But unfortunately, the much more scenic and demanding highway, if you can call it that, 25, traversing the spine of the Andes, was simply not in the cards. With less than a week remaining on our tourist visa, we didn't have the time for the steep, dirt hairpin turns and untracked sandy river crossings that Ruta 25 promised.
Buenas. ¿Hay gasolina?
Boliviano nomás, extranjero no hay.
Ya, extranjero.
No, no se puede.
No?
And since Chad regrettably missed the Yungas Road, also known as Bolivia's Death Road, on his ride south in 2019, decisions had to be made. So with that, we decided to beeline it into La Paz for a short layover, before fighting our way out of a maze of ridiculously steep streets, thanks to Google, and continuing north on the unexpectedly beautiful Highway 3. From there to the village of Yolosa, the jumping off point for the Death Road. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we need to get to and survive La Paz.
Yeah.
Good? Hold over. Like this. Holy sh**. I've never seen anything like this. This is amazing. Holy crap. I've never even seen a city like this before. One hell of a view. All right, let's try to get out of here.
It's kind of dodgy.
It's a bit steep, sorry.
After taking in the views that unfortunately our GoPro and black market Samsung are far from being able to do justice,
Damn, that's a steep hill.
we descended the steep and winding roads of Bolivia's second most populous urban center into the Esterito neighborhood and the waning daylight of a long day in the saddle. And just to mix things up a bit, right through the middle of a street market.
Well, it's got me wanting to turn that way.
That was thankfully winding down for the evening.
Right. I can't turn right. Huh?
As we did our best to chase the small pin on the map, with little success.
I'm sure that was the best idea. Put on.
But after directions from a couple of festive locals, we eventually found our hotel.
Muchas gracias. Joe. What a crazy city. Yeah, they were spicy. Well, it doesn't look like we're going anywhere fast. They can't seem to locate the owner of the truck, who is standing between us and our exit, so...
The next morning, we were sure to get up bright and early for what promised to be a long day.
Well, at least I told him an hour ago that we were going to be leaving at 10.
But eventually, almost an hour behind schedule, we were launched headlong into the second challenge of the day, using trusty Google Maps to guide us out of the city, which, as it would turn out, would be the most dangerous riding of the day, thanks in large part to the fact that many of these roads are in no way intended for motorcycles.
Christ. These streets are insane. Oh, how much longer do I have to do this? Why is it taking me this way? I gotta scout ahead to see what's going on because... ¿Y mucho más?
Cerrado es.
Perdón?
Curva cerrada es. Sí, sube, pero sale arriba.
Yeah,
Pero es así, parado es.
yeah,
Así es.
yeah, very steep. Hell. Alright, ciao. Gracias. Fucking hell. It's not even a fucking street. Google Maps trying to kill us.
Again.
And with that out of the way, along with a relatively painless fuel stop and a dusty ride out of the city, we were finally on Highway 3 and ascending the Andes once again toward the Death Road's 4,700 meter, 15,400 foot high point. But first, we will be treated to some unexpected views along this beautiful length of tarmac, stretching deep into the northernmost reaches of Bolivia's remote Amazon basin. The Yungas Road, constructed in part by Paraguayan prisoners of war, was the primary corridor between Bolivia's Amazon and the city of La Paz. While much of the road has been modernized, this section of Highway 3, completed in 2006, bypasses the most dangerous portion of the original route, a relatively short, albeit notorious, 40 kilometers of narrow, steep, and deadly dirt that is now simply referred to as the Death Road. And while today it is no more than a tourist attraction, it came by its moniker honestly. Up until sometime in the mid-90s, it saw 200 to 300 accidents annually, including a bus that plunged into the canyon in 1983, claiming the lives of over 100 passengers. And this, Tienda Doña Beni, a nondescript store and tire shop, marks its southernmost entrance, where mountain bikers trucked in from La Paz, can begin their 4 to 5 hour downhill journey to the village of Yolosa, and where influencers can come to snap a few photos, concoct a harrowing death road tale of their own, and ride an air-conditioned bus back to the city. Which, to be fair, we considered. But after waiting 5 years and having come all this way, Chad elected to actually give it a go. So we continued our descent down to the valley before bidding the asphalt farewell and making a quick pit stop in Yolosa before setting off to find out what all the fuss was about. After a short section of dirt through the suburbs, we arrived at the official sign, where Chad launched headlong into a fit of manic depressive Tourette's.
It's a mountain bike. It's just a big mountain bike.
Mm-hmm.
Rose, it's the death road.
What?
The death road.
Oh,
Yeah, it's they say it's the most dangerous road in the
in the road.
in the world or something. The death road.
Which would unfortunately last for the majority of our ride.
Hola,
Hola.
¿cómo está?
Bien. Tiene que cancelar 25 bolivianos por persona.
¿Cuánto?
25 bolivianos.
25?
Sí.
No problema. Dos personas. Perdón. Ahora. The death road.
Oh, wait, yeah.
What?
And after we paid a modest entry fee for this graveyard turned theme park,
Death road!
Chad couldn't help but share his self-proclaimed obnoxious exuberance with anyone
Death road!
and everyone
Death road!
within earshot.
Death road! Death road! Death road! Death road!
Including the occasional inanimate object.
It's the world's most dangerous guardrail! Death road!
if for no other reason than to remind them where they were.
Death Road!
High on a cocktail of equal parts joy, irreverence, and nervous energy, it hadn't occurred to Chad that despite being one of the world's most sought-after roads, that we were the only motorized traffic riding the North Yungas. Likewise, it apparently did not occur to the woman who accepted our entrance fee that there was a valid reason for that. And this was it.
The world's most dangerous backhoe!
As it turns out, the death road had been closed to all motorized traffic for months
Gracias!
after a major landslide.
Oh,
And up until recently,
what in the
even mountain bikes were forced to portage around this very section of road.
Hola! ¿Cómo está? Mucho trabajo.
¿Quiere pasar?
No sé. Poco peligroso, ¿que no?
Pasan, pero hay que arrojar piedra.
Sí, claro. ¿Y los otros?
Igual vamos a arrojar, ahorita va a terminar, vamos a arrojar.
Ah, sí, claro.
Pasa.
¿Y cuánto tiempo, más o menos?
10, 15 minutos, este tiene que terminar de...
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no problem. Tranquilo.
So I'm gonna have you walk this section because it's very narrow and it's just like a bunch of baby heads that they got packed up there, and it's pretty much a sheer drop.
Had we arrived a week ago, as had been the plan, we would not have been able to ride the death road at all.
Yeah, muchas gracias.
In fact, as we would later learn, over the last few years, the death road has been closed to motorized traffic more often than it's been open.
¿Ya que ya puede pasar?
Sí, yeah, listo. Okay, perfecto, gracias.
And it was here, at this very section of road Chad had openly mocked for the last 45 minutes,
Okay, I'm gonna try not to die on the death road. It'd be funny after all the shit I've been talking. Can end up in the ditch.
that his chickens would come home to roost. And he would admittedly and humbly put on a clinic for you, the fine people on the World Wide Web, on how not to ride an adventure bike. Please enjoy.
Ay, ay, ay. All right. Necesito poco tiempo. Gracias, chicos. Muchas gracias. Sí, solo necesito poco tiempo. Holy crap.
Caught up in the moment, both drunk on the death road's reputation and awash in the perceived celebrity of the moment, Chad was blissfully unaware of the fact that he had completely smoked the clutch, blaming instead his lack of forward momentum on the Africa Twins' occasionally inconvenient traction control.
I could tell, I could see
It was hitting the rev limiter, but the rear tire wasn't spinning.
And by the time he realized what was actually taking place, he was teetering above the abyss and past the point of no return. But thanks entirely to the road crew, whose beer fund received a generous donation on our behalf, we at least made it this far, which may very well be the end of our death road journey, if Chad can't manage to resurrect our clutch.
Hey Rose, where are we? No.
Death Road!
Death Road!